Good afternoon and welcome to Praxis Peace Institute's program with Dr. Ofer Zur. I'm Georgia Kelly, the director of Praxis. Today we are hosting a very important discussion on a very hot topic. And as you noted from the title today, this is a civil dialogue, and we do want to keep it civil. So I'm going to ask you to respect that. We can respect each other and not necessarily each other's point of views. It's a difference there. So I want to say a little bit about Dr. Zur because I have known him for a long time. And as you probably know, I think many of you here know him quite well. He's a licensed psychologist, fellow of the American Psychological Association, lecturer, ethics consultant, and forensic expert. He was founder and director of the Zur Institute, which offers over 180 online continuing education courses for mental health practitioners. He has also been practicing in psychotherapy for more than 25 years in California. He's one of the top experts in the field of psychological ethics, applying a non-dogmatic approach to multiple relationships and therapeutic boundaries. Some of Ofer's areas of expertise are very important in our discussion today because he has a deep level of inquiry that examines commonly accepted truths, which we will do today. He challenges unquestioned beliefs, which we will also do, and supports the breakdown of limited systems of knowledge, something that is important to remember. We rarely, if ever, get the whole story from our media or from our group. So it's important to have discussions like this, hear each other, learn from each other. So I'm going to give Ofer he's going to take a time to give an opening presentation, then I'm going to ask him a few questions, and then we'll open up to the audience for your questions. So welcome, Ofer. It's great to have you with us today.
Wow, it's really nice to be back in Sonoma. We lived here for many years. I married the ballet teacher of my daughter. Where is she? And we live now in Sebastopol, not too far.
Ofer, closer to the mark.
Like this better?
Right up.
Okay. We are going to cover 3 topics. And this will be an example of disagreement because I was supposed to do only 2. But we are going to do 3. One will talk about what happened last night. The elephant in the room. Then we are going to talk about Gaza, the West Bank, Israel, current, past, future, etc. The third one that we didn't agree much about, we'll talk about the related topic of antisemitism and the complexities of involved in antisemitism, which has kind of a new flavor in the last year or two. So let's start with last night. I'll make it short in the Q&A. Do you want to do the Q&A after each of these topics, or is it discussion, or at the top?
No, you go through the whole thing. And
I'll go through the whole tantrum. Okay, I'll do that. So we read all this information about 300 missiles were launched from Iran towards Jordan, Israel primarily. And it takes me sometimes to the bottom of the article to remind ourselves that this is a response to Israel killing a general in Iranian consulate, which means that it's illegal internationally to go into a foreign consulate. It's one of the places where people kind of are protected. So Israel just dismantled it and killed the Iranian general as well as 12 other people. So it's for me, it's just fascinating how this little fact is not mentioned regularly, or it doesn't start with, in response to what Israel did, this is what Iran did. But we don't see almost any of that. So We can talk about it for a long time. This won't be the focus today, but this is kind of where a lot of us kind of got rattled last night. But we need really to understand that it was initiated by Israel, my homeland, where I grew up and where I was born, and who dismantled in Damascus, in Syria, in the Iranian consulate in Syria, killed the general and 12 other people. So it's not like, oh, this terrible Iranian throwing 500, 300 missiles in all directions. There's much more context to that. And it's just amazing how it's not being mentioned up front. Okay, comments later, you said, yeah? Okay. So we'll talk about the second topic of Gaza. Super complex situation, as we all know. And I was a lieutenant in the paratroopers that served in Gaza. And it was experience that changed my life. So I was 20 years old, and I go with my 8 soldiers with me just to show presence in the refugee camp of Jabalia, one of the oldest one. The streets were, this barely will fit in a street in Jabalia. So we are walking in a line here with my 8 soldiers, and suddenly I hear a woman yelling at the top of her lungs in Arabic that I didn't speak well, holding a 2-month-old in her baby, a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old next to her, yelling at the combine, at the big tractor that just destroyed her house. So I tried to say, "What's the fuck?" Sorry. Is it okay language? So that's what I said in Hebrew. And they explained to me that in the morning there was a young man who suspected as a terrorist, but he left the house after spending the night with her. And for this reason, they leveled her house. And I saw the big tractors that did continue to clean the rest of what wasn't destroyed in the first 5 minutes before I was there. And I felt the rage. And years later, I kind of imagined myself, why didn't they have the force to do what the Chinese man did with the tanks in China? If you remember the picture.
Square. Yeah.
So, and I felt really low and guilty. And there were so many other incidents of me serving, like they put us in the middle of Gaza to show presence. And a soldier of mine just went to brush his teeth and got 1 bullet. And I'm holding him. White, but doesn't look dead, not even bleeding. And I'm 20 years old. Some soldiers that we send on weekend vacation to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem wouldn't come back. They hospitalized themselves in a mental hospital rather than coming back to the refugee camp. So I'm talking to my mother, a psychologist in the University of Tel Aviv, and I said, can I use any language? These motherfuckers wouldn't come back. And now I cannot send anybody out to take a 24 hours break. They are crazy. They admitted themselves to a mental hospital rather than coming back to the base in the middle of Jabalia. And my mother, in a very soft voice, said, perhaps they are the sane one and you are the insane one. Whoa. So that's kind of the parenting that I grew up with critical thinking and looking. And it really jarred me, kind of. Here's my mother telling me that I'm mentally ill. A psychologist telling me that I'm mentally ill. And when I saw, kind of years later, it haunted me what happened with this woman and how I didn't protect her and how I didn't have what the Chinese man did with the tanks and I didn't stop the combines. Really was haunting me with nightmares. And one of the most powerful incidents in Gaza, in the refugee camp, so 8 of us walking, just showing presence in Jabalia with streets that wide, 8 of us. And we found ourselves surrounded by young people between age 12 and 20 throwing rocks at us whenever we go to a little open space. And I put my soldiers in a circle with our guns towards these young ones. And there's closing on us. And I can see the rescue coming, but they have to go all around to get to us because these jeeps and command cars could not drive most of the streets in the refugee camp. And I hear them coming, and I see the hundreds of kids closing on 8 of us. And I kind of left my body, and from above, I told myself, you have 2 fucked up choices. You either shoot into 10-year-old that I could really associate with, because if I was there, I would be one of these 10, 18 years old. So you have 2 fucked up choices. You shoot at this young people so you can survive, or you're going to be eaten alive. And from above, I told myself, with these 2 fucked up choices, I have to leave. And this is why I'm here. I left Israel for this moment. So when you are an occupier and you need to have these 2 choices, you either leave or you shoot the 10, 12, 18 years old to survive. The rescue came probably, I would say, less than 15 seconds before I would have given the order to fire. So I'm here because I was with a weapon in Jabalia, one of the biggest refugee camps in Gaza. From above, I knew I have to leave because the occupier had these 2 choices, which I didn't want to face again. And I knew if I was there, I would be one of these hundreds of kids. So I'm here because what happened to me in Gaza. And what is it telling is that the occupier who has these 2 choices loses at the end of the day. And this is what I see right now happen. Our son is he's working on an ambulance as a medic, and he wanted to go to Israel to work as a medic. And I told him, you're going to the West Bank, and you are in a guardian position with the ambulance, and then you need to pick up a pregnant woman in the 10th month. She cannot deliver, she cannot not deliver, yelling, screaming, and you have 2 choices. Do you stop the ambulance and start looking for bombs? Because it can go somewhere and explode inside Israeli territory or inside the hospital. And you start taking things apart, and then she died and the baby died. Or You are very caring for the pregnant mother and the infant, and you let the ambulance go. And the ambulance go to a best hospital in Tel Aviv, and what happened? It blows up. Two bad choices again. He actually heard me on that. As an occupier, this is the two choices that you have. And it destroys, ultimately, the occupier. And this is why I left Israel. I did a big interview in the local, in the Israeli paper, and it was not pretty, what I heard back, but I knew I have to leave. Not to stand in this junction as an occupier. So when it comes to Gaza, and I would like to hear your wonders and thoughts and questions in a minute. As an occupier, you are doomed to fail and be destroyed, whether it's morally, militaristically, physically, clinically, name it. So, as an occupier, we're doomed. And I left Israel because of that. And we can talk more about it. The third topic is anti-Semitism. It's fascinating what happened with anti-Semitism these days. It used to be the far right, kind of the Trump people, blah, 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 whatever, are anti-Semitic. We have a whole new world right now of anti-Semitism in Berkeley High. And I lived in Berkeley for many years. I know Berkeley High. My daughter went to Berkeley High. It doesn't get more liberal. Doesn't get more liberal. And now the Jewish students stay in the class while people canceling classes so they can march around with, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And anti-Semitism right now is showing up on the intellectual left like we haven't seen anything like that in generations or ever. So it's not a right wing. It's a new world for us right now, educated Sonoma people. So our son listened to Al Jazeera in English, and he gets interesting information that so many of us don't get. Now in Israel, Al Jazeera you cannot get it anymore. They blocked it, as if it's going to help anything. So the anti-Semitism on the left is a new phenomenon that kind of changed a lot of our lives and our kids' lives here. So that's a huge discussion on its own, but I need to put it on the table as a huge impact of what happened in Israel and Gaza. That anti-Semitism suddenly have a new way to show, express itself. In Oakland, there's something about some holiday, Jewish holiday, so go down, thrown into the lake. In LA, Jewish bakeries are being vandalized, blah, blah, blah. And this is in California, so you can imagine what happened in some of the states, mid-country, Trump states. So we kind of in a different world in many ways. And this is the three topics. Was it okay? Was it okay? Is anti-Semitism that I add against your will?
That's okay, I'll argue with you.
Okay. Please do argue with me. And Okay, I have much more to say, but perhaps it's a good time to open it to the intelligent people to ask hard questions.
No, first I have some.
Right.
Yeah, I have two that I want to ask before we open up to the question. Since you brought up the anti-Semitism, this could take a lot of time, so I'm going to do that second, because I think the audience really will want to get involved in that. But I want to ask you about the role of beliefs, myths, religion, how these capture our minds to the point where we are so identified that if there's any discussion against our belief, it's us that they're dissing. So I want you to talk about the power of these beliefs. I mean, it can be anything. I think most people want to feel like they belong to something, whether it's a religion or a social club or a football fan club, whatever. Belonging is part of what we want as humans. So I think the danger comes when the belonging is so important to us that we are completely identified with it and can take no criticism, do not want to ask any questions. So this is what I'd like you to talk about first is, what is your process for deconstructing entrenched beliefs? And are you able to, you could use this mic if you want, are you able to talk to people about how they're identified with beliefs in a way that they can open their minds and see other possibilities?
Great question. As a psychotherapist, this was really my job, was really help people to think differently about how to discipline kids, how to disagree, how to deal with marital affairs. So it's kind of was something I've done as a...
You want to use this one? Yeah, it's better.
As a psychologist all my life. And understanding, for me, it tied to understanding things in context. So really to go into the other person's head and to see how does he see the world. Perhaps another experience that shaped my life in regard to the answer, I was in Somalia as a young man doing some fish work, whatever, and I saw some women in the morning coming, walking down on the desert, dig a little hole, put some little package in it, and go back, wash the dishes. And 2 days later, some other women will come and dig a hole and say, what the hell is that? So they're burying the babies. And so I wrote my mother, what the hell is that? And no mourning, no crying. And she says the desert cannot support 7 kids. This is what saved them. So 5 out of 7 will be buried. So anthropology for me is developing empathy. So the challenge that how would I understand empathetically this woman standing on her destroyed house? How do I empathetically connect with the kids who threw rocks at me, ready to eat me alive if the rescue didn't come or I didn't open fire? So for me, a lot of the question for you is to understand, to get into the other person's shoes and to identify with them, to see not just my point of view as a white, educated lieutenant in the paratroopers in Israel. So it's and perhaps an invitation, who are you upset with?
The Jewish leader.
So who are you upset with as a Jewish?
That he is continuing with the genocide against the
Okay. So I want you to do the difficult thing to go into the people who killed the people and I'm with you on what kind of fear when they say the Holocaust will never happen again. This is what they say. So they're ready to kill 32,000. Gaza, because you don't want the Holocaust to happen again, right or wrong. So how do you develop empathy to the other side? And this will increase two things. First of all, it will move you from just rage to compassion, and it doesn't mean it may increase your efficacy. It's hard. It's hard. That's a long way to answer your question. There'll be more.
That's good. That's a good way to answer that question. And I realized I did want to get into, I think anti-Semitism is really the most difficult one on two levels. One is, of course, I'm not Jewish, as you know by my name, Kelly. But we won't talk about Protestant and Catholics today. No, that wouldn't be a charge for me. But I think a lot of us on the left, and I've been on the left since I was 7 years old, so have feared being called anti-Semitic when we criticize Israel. So this has been something that I have dealt with all my life, and at least since I've been politically conscious, and most of the people on the left who I know have this same feeling that, oh, well, you can't criticize Israel because you'll be called anti-Semitic. I think we're past that now. At least I feel like I'm past it. I can criticize Netanyahu and Israel, and I don't think I'm going to be called anti-Semitic, at least not by people who know me, but others might. And I think that's one fear on the left. And then when you talk about it increasing on the left, when you mention the things happening in Berkeley, and I understand that, yes, there is some anti-Semitism, but I think it's been triggered a lot by what Netanyahu's been doing. And it's like the 6 decades or so of the settlements and the pushing the Palestinians out of their areas have built something. And on the left, we've not really engaged it. We've just we've known it's there, we see it, but again, that fear of being called anti-Semitic means we don't talk about it. And believe me, this Praxis Peace Institute has existed since the year 2000. This is the first program we've done on this topic. I was afraid to take it on for this very reason. I thought, well, I'm not Jewish, I can't do it.
It was awful to negotiate with her this session. She was so reluctant, and I always thought about her, like a goddess.
Well, I had avoided the topic because I thought this is going to just blow everything open. And now I realize, we've kind of been working with a few programs on Zoom lately and have moved the conversation. But so I'd like you to talk about what has happened that people have been triggered to they've gone from some people just being critical of Israel to, okay, this is just what they do, so I'm opposed to them as a people. So talk to that.
So I'm in a great position being a lieutenant and a paratrooper in Israel, so I can criticize Israel without being called anti-Semitic.
Self-hating Jew.
Self-hating Jews. It would be hard to call me that too. So, I'm relatively in okay position. But you're right. It's to be easy for you to be labeled as anti-Semitic because of the link between Jews and the certain government in Israel. And what I try to do, and Miron tried to do, and you try to do, to differentiate how we can be critical of what's happening in Israel, be anti what they do in Israel, without necessarily generalize it to all Jews. Because right now, so many Jews are holding my position, your position, Miron's position, that what's happened there is wrong. So how we differentiate that what Israelis do right now with 32,000 dead in Gaza, primarily children and women, is wrong, but it's not anti-Semitism. It's a heavy critique of what's happening in Israel, legitimate. So again, because nobody can call me really, I go to Israel, I drive motorcycles in the desert, I'm kind of, whatever, lecture there. And so there is a shift right now that you can be very critical of Israel without being anti-Semitic. But you're right, there was a period that you say what I say and you will be labeled an anti-Semitic. It's shifting a little bit, but consistently right now, that because more and more Jews are expressing what I'm expressing, so the shift, oh, you are anti-Semitic, doesn't flow as well. And it's going to get better in this, not better in the world, but it's going to be better around anti-Semitism to differentiate between critique of what Israel doing and anti-Semitism. And also the Jews here in America start seeing the writing on the wall. And so they feel Jewish, and the kids go to the synagogue and all this stuff, or they go to the synagogue, but they are opposing what happened in Israel. So this differentiation is already taking place. But you are right, originally it was, if you critique Israel, you're anti-Semitic. But I think because of people like Meron or me, it's a... Meron. So...
I'm still here, and I have the same opinion. Nothing changed.
Okay. So, Meron is a good friend in Sebastopol. So I think that we are inching our way to differentiate, which we didn't have at the beginning. And so you won't be called as readily anti-Semitic as so many Jews we hold the same position. And it's inching in this direction.
Yeah, nobody's called me that, ever.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I did want to ask one thing, and then I'm going to take this microphone out to the audience. But what do you think the U.S. position should be? Because we are just arming not only Israel, but Ukraine. We're just arming people all over the world. So let's just have a few minutes of your thoughts.
2 minutes. Wow. 2 weeks?
Sorry, I asked.
Okay, I'll have two points. James, you tell me if I capture it well. One, and I don't go into the big tantrum, that wars happen in this culture a lot because of the military-industrial complex. And some people will say that on me, so perhaps I can just not need to evaluate. I don't need to go more on that really there's investment in war by the military-industrial complex. The second one is that do we want to identify ourselves as anti-Semitic, or we are going to help Israel with our judgment? So this is kind of where you see the help from the United States. And I'll give Biden some credit for start monitoring the amount of weapons he's ready to give Israel. Israel will not last more than 3 days without the American weapons given to them. We won't be able to attack Gaza. It will last perhaps, but we won't be able to. So now he starts threatening not to do that. And then Israel bombed the Iranian in Damascus, and now they bomb back, and the military-industrial complex back in.
Make more money now.
Absolutely. So, but we can talk about kind of military-industrial complex and pharmaceutical-industrial complex and prison-industrial complex next time you invite me, or not invite me, actually.
Do
All right.
you think they should be funding?
Right. What was that?
Do you think, that's the question.
She's asking, do you think the U.S. should be funding the Israeli government?
So,
Isn't that your question?
The Israeli government or the Israeli army?
the same right now.
Yeah, right, it is.
So,
Could you repeat the question for
Actually, I'm going to jump forward to see how we're going to resolve the whole thing, or it's too early.
Yeah, let's take some questions
Okay.
from the audience first.
Can he answer that question? He didn't answer the
Yeah, you haven't answered the question, so this audience is on you, Ofer, to answer that question. What do you think the U.S. government should do in relationship to arming Israel?
Very simple. We should stop giving them the weapons. They will stop bombing Gaza because they get 60-story building, because on the 15th story perhaps there is a potentially a terrorist, so 50 stories are falling down and 3,000 people dead with American weapons. So they have to stop, because it's not in Israel, it's back to the wall, by no means. So I think they have to stop. But now they succeed to irritate Iran enough by killing the general, so now there's a good excuse for the military-industrial complex to send more. So it's kind of, they're smart. So what happened again, we need to remember what happened last night was initiated by Israel with American weapons.
Okay, you want to ask?
Yeah. Why did Israel go into the embassy in Damascus and kill 12 people, including an Iranian general? Why did that happen? It didn't happen out of thin air. Why did it happen?
We don't ask this question in the Israeli military. We have the enemy in Iran, and we're going to break all laws and all decency, and we're going to kill him. And Netanyahu, it serves him because the crisis will continue, and he's not going to lose power and to stand trials of corruption and end up in prison. In Israel, they do put presidents and prime ministers in prison for this kind of corruption. So it's a trigger. And the military-industrial complex cannot wait for this kind of things to happen. So there's a lot of forces that collude to do something like that, and now to justify testing all these new weapons. So it makes perfect sense to me.
I could counter every one of your comments today, but I'll just start with the last one. So do you think that if Israel puts down its arms,
I cannot hear.
if you think that if Israel puts down its arms and doesn't go into Gaza, which you, by the way, need to clarify with your audience, is not occupied, was not occupied on October the 7th, and it was not occupied. It was left in 2007 under Sharon, as we all know. My point is, if Israel lays down its arms, as you're suggesting, are you also suggesting that Hamas and Iran are not going to continue its stated policy to kill as many Jews as they can find and kill all Israelis that they can and destroy the state as we know it? Are you saying that that would not occur when you suggest that U.S. put down its arms for Israel?
You're absolutely right. The Iranian and Hamas want to destroy Israel. No doubt about it. And nothing that we can do will change their mind. And that takes me a little bit where we wanted to go later on. How do we resolve all these things? And I'll give you a 7-step, which hopefully will answer both of your questions, and many people have the same question.
Yeah, I think it's good if when we end, that we end with these 7 steps.
No, actually,
Do you
there'll be some debate about the 7 steps too. So
Okay.
that's a question
Of
that
course
everybody
there'll be a
sits on. It's a very important question that you ask. So I'll give the 7 steps, and that answers this kind of question and similar. So the first one, we need to release the 30,000 prisoners, terrorists from Israeli prisons, in exchange to the 130 prisoners that they hold in Israel. Complete. Because the fact that they are in prison does not stop any young ones for becoming a terrorist, and I would have become a terrorist. There's a fantastic movie, it's called The Gatekeepers. And The Gatekeeper is a movie of 7 secret police chiefs in Israel. And all of them say, if I was born in Bethlehem, in East Jerusalem, in Gaza, I will lead the Intifada, I will lead the fight against Israel, which is really a fantastic, it's called The Gatekeepers. So, number 1, release the prisoners, Hamas or not Hamas, who are sitting in prison by the thousands, like that, with their eyes closed and being fed with, what do you call it?
Tubes.
Yeah. 30,000. Release them. In exchange to the 130 prisoners that they hold from Israel, Israelis and other countries. Get out of Gaza and the West Bank. Not because we like them and not because we trust them. Just get the fuck out. Because occupying destroys the occupier. Number 4, give them an independent country. Because the fact that we say we left Gaza, it's ludicrous. There's no port and there's no airport. We left Gaza. We put a nice fence around it. We didn't leave Gaza. We continue to control Gaza, and every now and then we bomb. So we didn't leave Gaza for it to do whatever it wants to do, not even close. It just become a big jail. So give independence to Palestine, to Gaza, and the West Bank, close to what Rabin proposed back in 87? 93. And give them the state, not because we like them, not because we trust them, just because as an occupier you are going to lose. Do it selfishly. Give them a state selfishly. And the West Bank, with the 700,000 religious Jews, they'll have to choose. Are they going to stay there, or they're going to, like with the Sinai, come back to Israel and get a place to live? So they can choose either way. Get a big fence. Now, fences not need to be high, they need to be low for the tunnels. So have really good fencing. And to answer kind of what both of you brought up, they're going to shoot to Israel. Israel will shoot back. You have a few examples of that started like that. And until it's ready to do what South Africa and Rwanda did, and you have an example, you want to talk about it quickly, kind of?
Right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was talking to Ofer earlier about the Basque region, because probably many of you know about the ETA, the Basque terrorist organization, that over a 6-decade period had killed about 1,100 people, not only in the Basque region, but in other parts of Spain. And there was a peace worker there who actually was head of a peace center who decided this has got to stop. And so what he did was got together with a few people, formed an organization, and they said, let's try to do truth and reconciliation meetings between the victims and the perpetrators, and choose the people who are most open, of course, to this process, not put it out to everybody. And they found those people, and they started having talks, and within maybe a few months, certainly less than a year, the ETA representative said, okay, we're not going to do violence anymore. We're done with that. We'll work politically. Nobody believed it, because apparently they had said this before, but they did stay with it. They stayed with the process. They kept meeting. And a few years later, in fact, our group was there for a seminar when this happened, they turned in all the weaponry. They didn't turn it in at first because they were afraid of retribution for what they had done. So maybe 5 years later, they turned in all their weapons. And the next year when we went, not only had they turned in their weapons, but they said, we don't need to exist anymore. ETA, we're abandoning the organization. We don't exist anymore. We work politically. Terrorism completely stopped. All the graffiti we used to see on walls, gone. It's really changed the whole culture by having this process that they went through. All of this was changed in about an 7, 8 year period before the organization dissolved itself. No one had to get rid of it. They came to, I guess they were enlightened enough to understand what was happening. And the truth and reconciliation process that happened in South Africa, Rwanda, and other areas is so powerful. It works. But you have to work with the people who are open. You can't just put it out there to everybody in these groups. You start with the people who are most willing to hear another way of solving a problem, and then it will work, because they then become the leaders of the rest. And it filtered down so that it went through the whole culture. And it's incredible going there now, from when we first went in 2008 to the last maybe 6, 7 years. It's a completely different area. So, and they also have a Department of Peace in the Basque Parliament, so they recognize the importance of this.
We have many examples, South Africa, of course, and India, and what is it, shooting rockets there with whom? India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
We were riding motorcycles there, and we heard random shooting. So, there is ways, Germany and the United States, of course, but it's not a good analogy just because Germany was destroyed. And but nevertheless, there is kind of peace right now. So there is a process here, this kind of my 7 steps, that is not idealistic and not just, Hamas want to destroy my sister and my nephew and my sister's 13 children. They want to destroy them. I don't deny that. But right now we're destroying Israel, and we're creating an anti-Semitic move around the world, somehow justifyingly so, and we'll see where it goes, where people like me or my children who really do not support what happened in Israel will be differentiated as Jews and not be clumped together. And it's inching in this direction in Congress as well as on the streets, but it's not there yet.
It's kind of a form of suicide,
Yeah.
cultural. Shall I take another question, or do you have?
There is some.
Yeah, I saw. Okay. Actually, I wanted to go to you.
Oh, okay.
Then I'll come to you. Then I'll come to you.
I have a friend here in Sonoma, a rabbi, who has spoken on several occasions around Sonoma, and he's basically had the contrary offering of thoughts and ideas and commitments that you have, Ofer. And I guess my question is, your 7 steps sound wonderful, and the possibility of an outcome along that direction, there's a little fragment of hope there. But there are a lot of folks, like the gentleman that asked the last question before me, who are saying, we can't go there. We have to eliminate, and I'm talking about my rabbi friend, we have to eliminate every single last member of Hamas because they want to destroy us. So what could be the mechanism for getting from that absolute intransigence to the vision that you have?
Very, very good question. Last weekend, I had a debate with a Chabad rabbi, and we couldn't disagree more. It was like a joke. We were laughing how we don't have any common. He did a bar mitzvah for both of our boys, so we know him for a long time. But when we talk about this situation, it would be like, you Rabbi, we didn't agree on anything. But it was respectful in front of his congregation. It was very respectful. And you cannot eliminate Hamas. The more we bomb, the more Hamas. And if I was there, I would be Hamas myself. And probably you, the way I can read your aura, you'll be there too, with the oomph. So you make peace with the enemy. Again, you make peace with the one who wants to kill you, who wants to hurt you, the one who wants to rape your daughters. You make peace with them, because if they were aligned with you, there was no need for a process. So it's challenging and hard, but every day that Israel bombs Gaza, there are more Hamas people. Because if you grew up there, I would be the first to join Hamas with 33,000 and 70,000 wounded. So Hamas is growing. To say that and Hamas will hate Israel. And this is what I say, create a border, the bomb, you bomb back. You stop the tunnels. If you don't stop the tunnel, you deal with it again. You bomb back. Israel is capable of doing it. And they haven't done it for many reasons. Perhaps one of them is because the prime minister can get him out of prison himself. So you make peace with the enemy with the process that we have seen around. And you are right with your skepticism. But what you need to is right now we create more Hamas. So that doesn't work. But you need to make peace with Hamas without adding to that. And this is where a good border, what do you say in English? Fencing? Good neighbors, yeah. You got it, Americans sometimes. So you're right about your concern, but a big fence, and perhaps 2-3 generations, and we have so many examples around the world that it took that long. My wife came from South Africa, so I have strong feeling about how they negotiated the deal there in South Africa. Who would have thought? So everything you say, you are right, but the solution is not to continue to bomb that make Hamas even stronger.
I think that's a good point. We have another question here.
I wanted to address your observation at the beginning of the talk that there's been this rise in a kind of a new variety of anti-Semitism, and I wanted to kind of explore that a little bit because I think it's probably more complex than it's being presented. There's always been a native anti-Semitic strain, which is, like you said, primarily on the right. What has changed is that first of all, I think that the reaction of the left to the clear media misrepresentation, consistent media misrepresentation. If you listen to mainstream media, history began on October 7th. That's when it started. And so that has alienated people from what they've regarded formerly as legitimate sources of media. It is now even a state doctrine in certain parts of the EU that anti-Semitism, that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And that's Hasbara Operation Objective Number 1, is to conflate those two projects, which are not the same thing. Judaism will long predate Zionism and will continue after it. But the part of it that I think has changed is that people have come, there's now a what people are calling anti-Semitism coming out of the left is a recognition that the current government of Israel are fascists. And so they have proven that Jews can be fascist. And so the people are resisting them as on an anti-fascist basis. A fascist is someone who believes that their chosen group or their chosen class or their particular they're supposed to rule, they should rule, they can use force to maintain their rule. And that's very much the position. So there's an anti-fascist element on the left. Then for the kids, the Gen Z kids, I know from watching Twitch streamers and YouTubers, the George Floyd protests have conditioned them to see this as a race issue, as a kind of a colonial settler issue. And so they're coming at it from the point of view of seeing it as an oppression, a racial oppression. So all of those elements are there. And then, of course, there's unsophisticated, immature individuals that when the tide changes, they go against the other side. But they're irrelevant. I think that the main thing is going to be here is the fact that the Hasbara will continue to try to impose that standard. And I think we should resist that.
Comments? Okay. Let's see, who was next? Oh, yeah, there was one back here I saw a long time ago, so.
Hi. This is sort of maybe half-baked, but I do wonder about generational trauma on certainly the side of Jewish people in Israel and all over the world. And of course now it's, there's generational trauma being perpetrated in the occupied territories. Do you think that plays into, besides Netanyahu's political problems, do you think that plays into what's happening? And the other thing is, I do wonder about guilt on the part of United States governments and governments of certainly Britain in the Middle East that have basically created this problem. And I look at that and I think, we're complicit in this, at least our government was, and so we carry that, I think.
You have, the other microphone's better. And I know, Ofer, you said about decades, taking decades to make those changes, but in the Basque region, it was less than a decade. So it can be done.
It can be done. And especially kind of two Semitic breeds there in the Middle East. So post-traumatic reaction, I have a YouTube on that, a very short one, about how do you move from post-traumatic stress disorder to post-traumatic growth. And as you can see, the story of my life, that I got traumatized. I lost my calf in the war. When was it? 73. And when I was facing Ismailia with a group of paratroopers, and I fell down because a bomb just exploded and took my calf away. I told myself, I deserve it. I didn't believe in the war. I wanted to be a hero the way I was kind of primed to be. So we don't need always to link trauma or hardship with traumatic. It can be post-traumatic growth. And it's not only post-traumatic stress disorders that destroy you. We have people who came out of the Holocaust. What's his name? Me and names right now. Viktor Frankl. So here, he was a child in the concentration camp. There was no term yet at the times that he wrote the book, that post-traumatic growth. But we need to, I guess I come from a place where September 11 happened, I don't know, twice a year and doesn't stop us from doing anything. So it's easy for me to brush away trauma just because what's new. But even where there is child abuse, rape, when I work with my client, I try to look at the trauma as a way to get somewhere better as a human being or society. So the short answer to what you say, there is a construct of post-traumatic growth that it's so different than being traumatized for life and explaining the rest of your life due to the terrible trauma that you sustain. So I don't minimize the trauma. I just say, how do you handle it? How do you evolve with that? And we can talk more about it. But you're right about the trauma.
Okay, so back here, and then I'll go to you.
Like your moderator, I am Irish and I come from a different tradition of enemies versus enemies. You were talking about examples of how this could be done, but the Good Friday agreements in Ireland is also, like South Africa, a very good example. But in that situation, it worked ultimately because the United States on one side, supporting Ireland, the Republic or the Catholics, and the British government on the other side were willing to put aside all kinds of economic and political issues and force, through their power, the respective combatants in that particular conflict. The United States gave up something, the British gave up something, and they said, we will put aside differences and we will work with and force Northern Ireland and the Republic and the IRA to come together and resolve the matter. I think that's the only way that it's going to happen in Israel and in Gaza. Who are the larger powers, in your opinion, that could force the respective parties to sit down and to do the kind of experiment that she was talking about?
Beautiful examples. And there are many ways to achieve peaceful between, but this is a major, important way. In the Israelis, it would be United States, but it's not United States, it's a military-industrial complex. It's much more complex than just United States government. So, and how do you contain the military-industrial complex? Good luck. So it's not government per se, it's much more complex. And on the other side will be Tehran. And one of my dreams is to go to Shiraz before I die. And the people, the psychologists that I know in Tehran told me, don't come. So I know, but I may come anyway. Poor Genji had been married to me for a long time. And sometimes it's external forces that in this regard, the military-industrial complex is not going just to decide to be enlightened and not to make big money or something like that. It has to come from the people in the Middle East. And I don't villainize Tehran, who the first time really start throwing anything at anybody. They sold things or they produced weapons, but the first time they really launched anything was after the Israelis bombed the Damascus unit, the diplomatic. So I think in this case it will not going to come from what you suggested, but it's not the only way. I just want to say there are many ways to get to Mecca.
I'm not going to stand up because I have some arthritis, but it's what I've read about Rwanda and heard people talk about Rwanda, what I've heard about South Africa, and I don't know a lot about the Basque, but I think this might pertain to them. It was one country, and the people in Rwanda especially talked about how part of their resolving everything is that they gave up their tribal identities to become Rwandans rather than keep their tribal identities. And that's part of what happened there that allowed them to work together. And there's a one-state solution is not an option in Israel because Israel doesn't want a one-state solution because they want a Jewish state. And that's really important to have a Jewish state for a lot of Israelis. So a one-state solution is not an option. I feel that Israel has destroyed the possibility of a two-state solution by destroying, especially now that they've destroyed Gaza. And I see the only answer being that the international community get involved in rebuilding Israel, rebuilding Gaza, and Israel also show a willingness to donate and be involved in rebuilding Gaza, and to open it up so that Gaza is able to function as anything more than, I mean, now there's nothing there. It's like it's horrible. And I don't know if that's even a possibility.
You know, you brought up beautiful possibilities that there is. It's not one country, but you know, when we go to Israel and we meet our partners in the West Bank, the Palestinians, it feels like home. Like we go in Sebastopol every Friday, the Israelis meeting in the Palestinian restaurant. We call it Israeli Anonymous. So it's it isn't kind of so much compatibility, so much the same humor, so much the same view of politics and sexuality. So it's like there is a cultural mixture that doesn't separate us. And so that's one thing. But there's many ways to achieve, as you mentioned yourself, there's many ways to achieve this dual existence. And my sense is, because of what happened right now, it may take a few generations. But sometimes fences make good neighbors. But when I go to the West Bank, it feels home. My second language in high school, after English, was Arabic. That you have a choice, Arabic or French, yeah? So it's not that far, but we need a good fence. So there's many ways to create this dual existence, not necessarily with one border around. In this case, it would be one solid border in the middle.
Okay, we have a lot of people who still, is this on?
Okay, so I have 10 minutes.
Okay, it's on. Okay, I think maybe two more questions. What do you think?
You call, you show.
Okay, two more questions.
Hi, I would like to shrink this question down to local antisemitism. And what I observed yesterday inspired me to come here. Because I've been in Sonoma for 60 plus years and raised my 5 children here because it's the safest bubble I know of from anything that's happening in the world. But I have been in the Congregational Church for all these 60 years. And about 50 years ago, we opened our campus to share shalom. And we shared the Jewish community gladly. But yesterday, I was at a memorial service for one of my old friends at the Congregational Church. And friends, Rabbi Steve was there with his friends, all clearing up the place to make way for it. And standing there was an armed guard protecting them while they were doing their work. And I can't imagine this happening in Sonoma. What can we do locally to help this problem?
I'm not surprised. I'm just waiting. We try to check with our neighbors. It's going to hit us here. I have no doubt it's going to hit us here. And I hear a few episodes like that, and I personally almost take responsibility for that, because I have the alliance in Israel, and Israel created this mess and all this stuff. So when I hear about it, I'm more upset with Israel than I'm upset with the anti-Semitic response. So just to let you know where I come from. But yeah, we are not going to avoid it here. It's just coming. And my son in Sacramento, an attorney in Sacramento, he said he hasn't seen it there. You must be kidding. I mean, in Sacramento, everybody's feeling so strong. So it's coming. And it may move us to put the pressure on Israel to stop the murderous bombing, but how to deal with the military-industrial complex that benefit from that, good luck.
That's our job.
I guess the battery is just dead.
Well, maybe it's. I think it's gone. We'll put that one away and we'll use this. I think there was.
That it is gone.
The message is that we're taking one more question because we're running out of juice here. Oh, that's right. You've had your hand up for a while. I haven't seen you.
I don't want to be the last person to talk, though.
Yeah, we'll see how long you talk. The shorter you make it, the more likely someone
Okay, all right. I have 4 Persian grandchildren, and their great-grandmother lives in Shiraz. I'm also of Jewish heritage. Turns out I'm Ashkenazi Jew. And but my question is, I know that that there is a huge fight for our hearts and minds. And I resist this, of course, because I'm oppositional to most everything. As a question, as I look at the scenario that took place in October 7th, and I look at the party that was going on, and I look at the situation there where the party was, the people who were there at the party, and I may not get all the facts straight, because I'm not political, but it seems to me that I'd like to have your reflections on because there are no coincidences, and I do believe in God, that there is something that we need to know about that confrontation. And I know the hatred. I have witnessed that crazy hatred that people have, that that say this group is bad and this group isn't bad, or vice versa. And so I just wondered if you have any thoughts about that particular location at that time in your perspective, and how that might play into the future.
I think it's really perfectly irrelevant how it started. It has been boiling now for decades, and it's where the fire started is kind of meaningless. It could have started anywhere. And what comes up is really this hatred and this military-industrial complex happy to sell the weapons. So it's like as a psychologist, it doesn't matter who started the fight. What's really interesting, what the fight is about. So who started the fight is meaningless. for me as looking at conflict, because if it's so much tense and it can blow up from this angle or this angle, it doesn't matter. What's important is the tension and the hate and the history. So for me, it's irrelevant, this gathering of young people there, that it came like that. Okay.
I think there was another one. You just said something that I wanted to comment on, but I'll wait until we get another question. Okay. You have to come up here because this has a short cord.
You know, I think one thing we're not addressing is that we're watching a Holocaust in Gaza, slow-moving one. I'm a Jew. And I'm just curious how you see it affecting Jewish identity. Because the Jews have carried the Holocaust card for a long time. And now they're creating one. Okay? It feels like a lot of capital is being spent here. This is my personal feeling. Just curious what your thoughts are.
God, beautiful question, beautiful wonder. I just finished another YouTube about rethinking Don't Blame the Victim. And I use the Holocaust as an example. How the Jews were so collaborative, and I lost 3 out of my 4 grandparents in the Holocaust. How they organized themselves so well and even kill each other within the barracks when people did not obey the Nazis and create waves. So they were like perfect victims. Not very popular view of victimhood. So the Holocaust gave Israel permission, with the Holocaust will never happen again, to commit atrocities. And so it's good you brought it up. I mean, it's definitely part of the...
I see in Washington a Jewish Holocaust museum
Yeah.
and a Palestinian one
Yeah.
sitting side by side.
Yeah. Let's hope.
Well, that's what I see.
So let's hope, and it will be reserved. So the Jews, I mean, as a Jewish person, I can talk like that they were just a perfect victim in the Holocaust. So victimhood is a complex phenomenon. I'm so politically incorrect that sometimes when I talk about battered women who married again, the 7th men who batter them, what kind of victim they are if they only choose a victimizer. Politically incorrect, it's not a word, I know. We don't get into that now. It's the next time I'll come here, perhaps, if I come. So, but you're right that there is a righteousness with the Holocaust will never happen again, or Masada will never happen again, that gets the Jews not responsible and capacity to kill the Arabs. Very good way to end, actually, here, to understand some of the mentality of Israel. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Before we finish today, I just want to mention 2 things. One is, Ofer brought up something really important just toward the end here, and that was, who started it isn't the question. And this is something I learned living in Yugoslavia the year the war broke out, the civil war broke out. I would ask, well, who started it? Was this the Serbs or the Croats, or was it back to World War II? And the more I asked that question, the more I got ridiculous answers. And I finally realized that this is the wrong question. What is the right question? It's definitely not this. And what I learned was you have to learn context. You have to learn the history. You have to know these pieces and why people put them together the way they do. Because different groups, I mean, the Serbs and the Croats, like you're saying, the Arabs and the Israelis, they have so much in common. They even have the same language. And yet, here was this war. So asking that question, I learned, was just super mistake. And the other thing I want to mention, because we've kind of touched on it, is, and Sam Keen is here today, he wrote the book on this question. It's called Faces of the Enemy. Everybody here should buy that book, and you'll see how people create enemies, how they project the demon onto the other side. It's really a critically important book, I think. So you have any last words, Ofer? No? You don't? You're going to let me end it? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and I hope I see you again.